Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the objectivity and the impartiality, or rather the lack of it, in the mainstream and any government-funded media outlet now, or Western government-funded media outlet, taxpayer-funded that is. So I was watching an article or a piece yesterday in Australia's biggest news media outlet, and they've given over now to, they're pretty much completely in the area of propaganda and socio-political hustling and messaging. They don't even attempt to hide it anymore. They scream and cry when there's any narrative out there that isn't consistent with the globalist talking point messaging, but they're allowed, as they see it, to tell as many lies as frequently as they want, assuming it's consistent again with the globalist talking points and messaging. So the news article was about the current European elections, the one going on in France, of course, the one that's happening in a few days in Britain, and other recent the EU elections, for example. So this was the topic to talk about. Now, I'll just sort of give you some idea. The objectivity was well, zero. There was no objectivity. The activists that involved in this, it was 5 minutes and 30 seconds or so. And the activists involved weren't declared or stated, so let me just have a look at the slurs here. Remember, this is only 5 minutes. Far right was mentioned 14 times and done in sort of with denunciations attached. Nazi once, fascist 3 times, xenophobic twice, anti-Semitic twice, Holocaust denial, and anti-open borders. So when you add the it's all up, it was 31 denunciations for the so-called white supremacist got a gig as well. So where is the objectivity? Was there any denunciation of others? They're saying in the pro-mass migration group who've ruined Western Europe. No. All denunciations were just in one direction alone. There was no critical examination of anything else. And the announcer was aghast that I just can't understand why anybody would vote for these fucking, no, I shouldn't use the F word, for these Nazis. I mean, they're Nazis. How could anyone vote for them? And there was no critical examination of, well, the people are very concerned about mass immigration changing their country. No, they're xenophobe fascists. They're not people who are concerned about the mass migration. They're just xenophobe fascists. Done. We're on to that. And the behaviour in Europe is reminiscent of 1930s Germany, fascist Nazi, and so on. It went again. No attempt whatsoever at objectivity. But came back a couple of times to the brown person doing the main anchoring on this one, pretending that she couldn't understand why anybody would vote for this. Why are there so many Nazis in Western Europe? How could there be so many Nazis? And again, without addressing any of the issues. Now they got on a supposed. What they didn't say is the brown person who was doing the main anchoring on this segment. They didn't tell you that she's employed, as a consultant for activist NGO groups that support mass immigration and so on. Now, if that was mentioned, you might see the program in a different light. But then they get a guy who's supposedly an expert on European politics, and he just parrots every talking point that the anchor's going on, that they're xenophobic, they're fascist, it's 1930s Germany all over again, and so on and so forth. Again, no critical examination of what the globalist agenda is, just anyone who opposes it is a Nazi. And this guy, now what they don't say is this guy is indeed an academic, but he's a homosexual activist academic who, again, is being paid by NGOs to pump out, in effect, propaganda. So the whole piece is a propaganda. If they started this, now in this news item, we will simply denounce people that we don't agree with. We will provide no critical examination of the negative effects of mass migration and climate change, radical climate change policy. We won't talk about the globalist control of the body's politic. We won't talk about how people with legitimate concerns are just being brushed off and dismissed as all being Nazis. And by the way, I'm an activist for an NGO group, and we're going to get on a commentator who is also an activist and paid by NGOs to push globalism. Now, if they went like that, then nobody would take any notice. But the concern I have is how all these pieces and articles are presented as factual and delivered by unbiased people who are simply observing what's going on. It's nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort. The word far left wasn't mentioned once. The whole 5-minute segment was just an absolute denunciation of what they see as the far right. Now, they accused the far right of anti-Semitism. Well, what anti-Semitism? That's the same thing they accused Tucker Carlson of. What anti-Semitism? Where's the example of anti-Semitism? I just don't know. I've forgotten. I heard it somewhere. Now, this is very much the response you get from these people when you challenge them. What anti-Semitism? They'll try and come back. I'm offended by your attitude. No. You said anti-Semitism. What anti-Semitism can you cite? Oh, you're just Hitler. No, cite the anti-Semitism. And they can't. So after they've called you Hitler and Nazi and fascist, hold them to it. Keep on at them. You've said anti-Semitism. What is the anti-Semitism remark that I've made or Tucker made or this or that person made? And they can't do it. So they're very much in a position of such moral superiority. They can simply assert that you did it. They can just falsely assert, falsely claim that you're anti-Semitic or you're a Nazi or you're a fascist or you're Hitler. They can just and most people say, well, no, I'm not Hitler. That's not true. My best friends are Jews. And they've got you already. You're backpedaling. You're apologising for something you haven't even done. So you have to hold them to account. And okay, where's the example of this? And they can't do it. And you see this in the street interviews when they talk about. Donald Trump is such a racist. Okay, well, what has he said or done that's racist? Look, I just don't know. I heard it somewhere. Now, what's interesting here is I remember listening to a very early LGBTQ before those alphabet people existed in that name anyway, or being referenced in that way. And this would have been probably very early 1990s, somewhere around there. And there was a lesbian woman being interviewed on a TV show, and she said that tens of thousands of gay people were being murdered every year by homophobes and the like was the claim. And so back in those days, the interviewer challenged her on that and said, okay, well, where do you get those numbers from? And she tried to obfuscate her way out of it by saying, well, if you're a homophobe, then I don't care. You're just showing off your homophobic credentials. No. And the interviewer kept at her. Where have you heard that thousands of being murdered every year? And eventually cornered, very unhappily cornered, she just shrugged and said, I don't know, I heard it somewhere. And that was it. Now, that standard of evidence that was used in, again, the early 1990s, that standard of evidence exists and that attitude exists today. You need merely assert it. And that's it, job done. But if someone calls you on it, you then have to denounce them as being Hitler. But if that doesn't work and they keep on, you just say, I heard it somewhere. And this is J.K. Rowling is a transphobe and a Nazi. And someone's called out on one of the street interviews, and they came out with the same thing. I heard it somewhere. And so this is the standard of evidence that these people bring to the table. On what basis do you claim Marine Le Pen is a Nazi? I heard it somewhere, and that's it. So if you challenge them, and you have to, once you challenge them, then they'll accuse you of being a fascist. But ignore that. Just forget about it. Just keep on at them. Where have you heard this? Can you prove it? Can you cite it? Just stay on them. And if you persevere long enough, while they're calling you Hitler and all that. If you persevere long enough, they will admit that they can't cite it. They have no factual basis, no evidence, nothing to back it up. But unfortunately, our entire media ecosystem has been hijacked by these activists and these news announcers and journalists and so on, and they just even with Tucker Carlson was recently in Australia. I think he still is actually, and there was a journalist who was sent as an attack dog, to do a hatchet piece on him, and so are you denying that you're Hitler type thing, and so accused him of saying. I think it was in reference to the Great Replacement thing, which of course is a real thing, but they're pretending it's not. And if they say white people are being replaced, then they're good and virtuous. If white people say they're being replaced, conspiracy theory. And accused Tucker of saying Tucker came back. No, I don't think I've ever said that. Can you cite it? And again, she tries to, the journalist, who's an attack dog, hatchet job journalist, not a journalist, she's an activist, for Christ's sakes, tries to then slightly change the subject. Oh, well, are you saying you're not responsible for that, and this type of thing? But Tucker's been around too long to go over, and he kept on at her saying, "Can you prove it?" And she couldn't, and she was just asserting it. And again, it comes back. Oh, I heard it somewhere. So always remember, whenever you're dealing with these sort of people, whether it's someone at a dinner party, someone at I don't know, in any setting, and particularly if you're looking at the media, wait until they cite it or prove it or show. Just asserting it blithely, they're all Nazis. That doesn't work. You've got to prove it, and if you can't prove it, then you're the Nazi. You've been with Tacitus State, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.